There are moments where a thought keeps coming back, even when you try to move on from it. You shift your attention, you focus on something else, but it returns. Sometimes it stays in the background, and other times it becomes more intense the more you notice it. It can feel like it should be under your control, like you should be able to stop it. But the brain does not repeat thoughts randomly. When something keeps coming back, it is following patterns that are already built. The brain is designed to reuse what it has learned before. This is how it saves effort and processes information quickly. Thoughts that have been repeated, linked to emotion, or connected to something unresolved are easier to bring back into awareness. What feels like a loop is often the result of how the brain learns, prioritizes, and reactivates information over time. The brain is always filtering information because it cannot process everything at once. It has to decide what deserves attention and what can be ignored. In neuroscience, this is linked to attention and salient systems that help the brain highlight what stands out. Thoughts that feel important, uncertain, or connected to something that could affect you are more likely to stay active. Because of that, the brain brings them back into awareness. This is not about choosing to think about something. It is how the brain organizes what still matters. If something feels linked to a decision, a possible outcome, or something that could change what happens next, it stays higher on the list. The repetition reflects that priority system at work, not a lack of control. The brain treats finished and unfinished situations differently. When something is finished, there is a clear endpoint. A decision has been made, a conversation has reached a conclusion, or an outcome has been accepted. At that point, the brain can reduce activity around it and store it as completed. This is supported by research in memory and attention. But when something is unfinished, the brain keeps it active. In psychology, this is known as the Zeigarnik effect. Unresolved situations are more likely to stay in attention because the brain treats them as incomplete processes. There is no clear closure, so the system continues to return to them. It is not about how big the situation is. It is about whether the brain has marked it as complete. Until there is some form of resolution, the loop stays open and easier to revisit. Each time a thought comes back, the pathway that supports it becomes easier to activate. This is how the brain learns through repetition. In neuroscience, this is explained by neuroplasticity, where connections between neurons strengthen when they are used repeatedly. The brain follows a simple principle. What is used often becomes easier to use again. Over time, this reduces the effort needed to bring that thought back into awareness. It no longer requires a strong trigger because the pathway has been reinforced. The repetition builds familiarity, and familiarity increases speed. That is why the same thought can appear quickly and sometimes without a clear reason. It is not just returning. It has been strengthened through repeated activation. Attention plays a direct role in keeping the loop active. The brain uses attention as a signal to decide what information should stay available. In neuroscience, this is linked to attention and salient systems that help the brain select what stands out. When your focus returns to a thought, even briefly, it tells the brain that this information matters. That signal increases the chance that the same thought will be brought back again. This creates a feedback loop. The more attention the thought receives, the easier it becomes to notice and revisit. Even trying to push a thought away can bring attention back to it, which keeps it active. The loop is not only built through repetition over time. It is maintained in the moment by where attention goes and how often it returns. Thoughts that are connected to emotional reactions are harder for the brain to let go of. In neuroscience, emotion and memory are closely linked through systems like the amygdala and the hippocampus. When a thought creates a reaction in the body, such as tension, discomfort, or unease, it becomes more noticeable and more likely to be remembered. The brain treats emotional signals as important because they may be relevant for future situations. This increases the priority of that thought in the system. It is not just something you are thinking about. It is something you are also feeling. That combination makes it harder to ignore and easier to bring back into attention. The stronger the emotional response, the more weight the brain gives to that thought, which increases the chance that it will return again. The brain is not only reacting to what has already happened, it is constantly trying to predict what might happen next. In neuroscience, this is known as predictive processing, where the brain uses past experiences to anticipate possible outcomes. When something feels uncertain, the brain brings related thoughts back into awareness to prepare for different scenarios. It runs through possibilities, trying to reduce uncertainty and get ready for what could happen. This is why a thought can return even when nothing is happening in the moment. The brain is not just replaying the past. It is also simulating the future. The repetition is part of that process. It reflects the brain's attempt to prepare, not just remember, which is why the same thought can keep coming back even without a clear trigger. Thoughts are not stored as isolated pieces. They are connected in networks. In cognitive science, this is known as associative memory, where one idea is linked to many others. Because of these connections, a small trigger can activate a much larger chain of thoughts. It can be something simple, like a word, a place, a memory, or even a brief shift in attention. You may not notice the trigger itself, only the thought that follows. Once the network is activated, the brain can move quickly from one idea to the next. This is why a thought can return without an obvious reason. The trigger may be small, but the connections behind it are already built. The loop restarts because the system is linked, not because something new has happened. A thought loop continues because the same pattern keeps being activated. The same attention, the same reaction, the same pathway. Changing it does not come from trying to stop the thought. It comes from changing what happens when it appears. In neuroscience, this is still the same principle of neuroplasticity. The brain strengthens what is used. If the response stays the same, the pathway stays the same. But if something different happens after the thought shows up, the brain begins to register a new pattern. At first, it requires more effort because it is not familiar. But with repetition, that new pathway becomes easier to activate. Over time, the brain starts to use it more often. What once felt automatic can begin to shift because a different response is being practiced and reinforced.